All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for our writing paths, where we are talking about navigating the literacy landscape. My name is Alyssa. I am the program deputy at The Word, and I'm also a children's book author and your host for today's event. The Word is a nonprofit organization whose mission is storytelling for collective abundance. We center authentic storytelling for BIPOC, LGBTQIA2S+, neurodiverse, and disabled communities. We support and connect writers, publishers, booksellers, and readers. We also explore and build collective models for the literacy ecospace, and we hold space for community. Our main programs include the Editor-Writer Mentorship Program, our Margins Conference. I'm actually rocking our Margins Conference shirt, which is also a book festival. We also host our Margins Bookselling Month for booksellers, and it also includes our BIPOC Bookseller Award. And then we do programs and workshops like this. So lots of exciting things that we do. We always have new programs and events, so please make sure you check out our website and stay up to date with our stuff by connecting on our newsletter. So we are discussing navigating the literacy landscape. I am so excited to bring Linda Camacho on board. Oh my gosh, I've been like cyber stalking you for like the longest before it was like appropriate. Even I think I've just been like obsessed with you and your work, and I've heard so many good things about you from other like Latinx authors, and so to be able to have you in conversation is super exciting. I'm gonna read your bio, which I was like, oh my gosh, go ahead. So you graduated from Cornell with a bachelor's in science and communication and held various positions at Penguin Random House, Dorshire, Simon & Schuster, Writers House, and Prospect Agency. You've done everything from foreign rights to marketing to editorial to operations. What haven't you done? And you received your MFA in writing from Vermont College of Fine Arts. Now at Galt and Zacher Literacy Agency, you are looking for middle grade, YA, and adult fiction across all genres, especially upmarket, women's fiction romance, and literacy horror, and also select picture book and graphic novel writer illustrators. Whew. Okay. Is there anything else that I missed that you want to share?
No, I just took jobs wherever they were like, Linda, do you want to join? I'm like, yes. Wherever they hired me, I was just, yes, ma'am. That's why I had so many roles.
Amazing. Seriously. Like, oh my gosh. Obsessed. Okay. So we're going to jump into it.
Okay.
What are the key roles and responsibilities of a literary agent in the publishing process? There are a lot of people that are tuning in are familiar, but not everyone. So let's just start there.
Right. Yeah. I'll start with the basic. You think of contract negotiations, right? I think that's what most people think. Agents were just there, vet the contract, and half the time they're like, okay, that's it, right? I'm like, no, I mean, that would be very easy.
Right.
Definitely. But I mean, if we go back farther, if we talk about earlier in the process, obviously, again, it's all subjective. Everything in this process is subjective. But if I fall in love with a manuscript and then I get nervous, and then I'm always hopeful that the potential client signs with me. That's what I love about publishing. Oh, absolutely. I definitely get nervous. Like agents get nervous, editors get nervous. We get what I love about it is that the power dynamic is constantly shifting. It's like, yes, in the beginning, it does feel like you're jumping through hoops. But once you get our attention, we're like, please, we're jumping through hoops after that. And then it just so on and so forth.
Thanks for sharing that, because I was like, oh my gosh. I felt like I got so many grays during the querying process.
Oh yeah, it's incredibly stressful, especially when you're talking to people. You want to make sure it's the right vibe, that you're going to click. And sometimes you have maybe a dream agent in mind, and sometimes they're amazing, but are they the right person for you? Right. All of these factors have to come into play. So I definitely get nervous. And then when I'm lucky and they say yes, it's like we get the show on the road. You know, we go through an editorial process. You know, it's pretty rare that I don't have to touch the thing, you know, where I come in, you know, it's always in the best shape that the writer can get it by the time it gets to me. But then I try to take it to the next level because it's just so, it's such a saturated market, you know, like there's so many writers, so many talented writers, and there are only so few editors. And things have been shifting, as you've seen in the marketplace, not to be a Debbie Downer, but there have been a lot of layoffs and there have been a lot of, you know, combining of imprints and things like that. Yeah. So it makes for, unfortunately, fewer prospects. So that means it's just a little bit more competitive or a lot more competitive. So what I want to do is make it as competitive as possible, like make it bright and shiny and beautiful. And again, I'm not an editor. I'm very strong editorially, but the editorial process, it's a separate whole other thing. But I try to get it as close as possible so that the editor gets excited as well. So yeah, so we go through, again, various rounds, and then we go through the submission process. And then after, okay, wait, we get an offer. Awesome. And then, of course, the contract stuff. Everybody knows we deal with contracts. But then after, I'm still there, right? It's I try to, you know, once the client has signed with ideally that perfect editor, you know, it is a collaboration. So I do like to respect that and honor the process, because if I'm there going, oh no, you should edit it this way and that way, like I would just muddy. That's not my role anymore. It's more my role. I like to think of myself as the guardrails. You know, like I want to make sure that everything goes beautifully and smoothly and nothing really goes off track, right? So I always ask to be CC'd on client emails. Again, not to interject and be that nuisance, but if I start to see, ooh, there could be an issue here, or maybe my client doesn't, it could be on either side where like maybe the editor doesn't understand a thing, or maybe my client doesn't understand and maybe there's frustration, or I can always tell when something's going to pop up. So I will try to interject and just keep it nice and smooth. And, you know, I don't think I've ever experienced a process where it's been adversarial. Like that's the beauty of it. I think a lot of people sometimes forget. It's like, yes, you have the man with the corporate, you know, publishing house. And that's what I'm always there for. But in terms of navigating that editor client relationship, it is very collaborative, right? We all want you to succeed. We want you know, because think about it too, at the very least, even if we didn't care about you, the author, which we do, if we cared nothing about it, why would we take you on, do all of this work, me for free until I get paid?
Until you get paid.
Until you get paid. And then the editor having to jump through hoops to get that book acquired so that we're like, oh, it's just going to fill. We don't care. No, we want it to do well. So even with something simple like copy edits or, you know, explaining, you know, sometimes there are issues there. There's like every little process where it seems like there might be an issue. I'm just there in case. And I like to think of myself as the interpreter, because sometimes my client will go like a lot of sidebar. We're like, Linda, I don't know what this is. I'm like, okay, this is what that means, right? Or, you know, like, okay, that's what that means. Don't feel silly for asking questions. Like, we're here for you. Or, you know, sometimes if there's like a slight kerfuffle, you know, I'll always tell my client, okay, this is what we can ask for. This is what's reasonable to fight for. And we go in, right? But there are times where I'm like, actually, this is standard, you know, and so to know what battles to choose when we're going in for things, right? When things like that can get heated, sometimes the cover situation, you know, so, and there are various aspects that we can pick apart with that, because we obviously want you to be happy, but the thing is not and we want it to be kind of that compromise, right? So that's the kind of the downside to traditional publishing, where it's no longer you, right? Just you making the sole decision. It becomes like a village project where we're all raising the baby together and trying to make it as beautiful as possible. But there are compromises that come with that. Definitely. So yeah, I'm there all the way through. So we're always talking to the marketing publicity people, trying to make sure things are happening when they're supposed to. I'm always there, you know, when the time comes, chasing payments. But like, Linda, where'd it go? I'm like, I'm going to find that. Let's get that payment. Or, like, you know, all of those little details. I'm just there making sure everything is like golden smooth path. And always, hopefully it is, you know, ideally.
Right. Amazing. Yeah. My agent is my best friend, honestly.
Oh, she's awesome. I love her. Caitlin, right? Caitlin's amazing. Yes.
Because especially like, as you know, like when I was like super new, there's so much lingo, there's so much like terminology, weird stuff, which we're going to do another workshop on. We're going to like talk about publishing lingo in another workshop. So super excited about that. But especially at the beginning, I'm like, yo no entiendo esto. I don't know what is going on. What does this mean?
Yeah, like the emotional aspects on top of that too.
Definitely.
Yeah. But yeah, trying to understand, and again, right, when you have that, you want that relationship with an agent where you can feel like you can talk to them and
Yep.
ask them questions. And yeah, because there's some people that it's not even necessarily, I mean, yes, there's some agents who can be scary, but for the most part, agents sometimes, I guess, have that glamour, that weird, we're just book geeks. Like I always tell my sister whenever I go to a conference, I'm like, this is the only place in life where I'm considered an anybody.
Celebrity.
That's the only place because
Roll up
I
in
am
the
a
carpet.
geek. I am a nobody. But in there, I'm like, wow, I'm a celebrity. So, but I never let that go to my head because without you, where am I? I need you. And I'm always looking for that special book, that special person with the book. So, yeah, whenever you're trying to figure out an agent, make sure you can talk to them. And there are no stupid questions, truly, because I mean, it's not intuitive by any stretch. It just isn't. No.
Definitely. Oh my gosh, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. So let's talk a little bit about do's and don'ts
Okay.
when querying a literary agent. So you
Yeah.
said you're a nobody, which I could not agree with that statement at all. But when it comes to querying you or another agent, what are some things that we should and shouldn't do?
Yeah. So, okay. I know it seems simple, but I always say the obvious: follow the rules. Always follow the rules. And I wish there. I really empathize because at least with queries, it's pretty straightforward. But right, every agent and agency has their different rules. It's like send me 50 pages, send me no pages, send me a partial. So I would just say have like a spreadsheet. Definitely follow the rules because again, we can understand when people make mistakes and we're not that harsh, like sometimes there's a misspelling, try to get it as tight as possible, but I'm not going to hold certain things against you. It's just we can tell like if you're completely, there are occasions though you're here, so I doubt this is you at all, but I've definitely gotten people where I can tell they've never even looked at what a query letter looked like. I can tell when you've just never even bothered and you just wrote up something and there you go. They're like, here, all right, here's my book. I can always tell. So, we want to see some effort put in. We want to see rules. And while that seems simple, it tells me how you're going to act professionally, right? Because that's the thing, right? There's so many rules, especially again, we're talking about traditional publishing, and it's not for everybody too. I think it's always good to know not one is better than the other. Some people are amazing and can do so well with self-publishing, and I respect the people who do it. I could never do it, bless them. But for traditional publishing, like there are specific rules of their own that you kind of need to follow.
Yeah.
And you break some, but at least understanding the lay of the land. So rules, big deal for us. And then, yes.
I cannot agree with you more on that. Through one of our other programs, the editor writer mentorship program, we have very specific rules.
Yeah.
It's an amazing opportunity in which you actually get mentored by an editor.
That's amazing.
Right?
Yes.
I was actually one of the mentees in 2020, I think.
Awesome.
And as a result of that mentorship program, 2 of my books
look at that
are, out in the world.
Wow.
So having those rules to follow on the application was super important because it was already training me on how to pay attention to those details and to make sure that I was ready to work with an editor. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen a lot, but some applications get disqualified. And we tell you why. It's like you didn't follow this rule, which was an important rule. Like one of the main rules is everything is anonymous. If you put your name on the application,
that's it.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, like you said, like it's a hint and a clue. Like, are you taking your time? Are you taking this seriously? Are you following the instructions? Can you follow instructions?
Right.
Because you're not going to be able to call all the shots in traditional publishing.
Right. Yeah. That's definitely. No. Always feel free to jump in. That's absolutely true. And then with the query letter, I won't go into the full structure of it because that's like a whole other session. But just knowing the structure of the query letter, I would always say, this is kind of tied with a don't forget to talk about your book, which I know it sounds silly, but sometimes a person will talk about who they are, why they've come to write the book, and then they might give me the title, and then they forget to kind of tell me anything. Maybe they give me a line. I'm like, wait, focus on the book. Like the book is the star. And then of course we want that brief bio. We want to get to know you, but you really hook us with the book. And then we start to become obsessed with you. And then we'll look into you, and then we'll kind of do the cyber stalking, which is totally normal for us too. So yeah. And I would say if we go into the do's, again, just know what you're doing, do the best you can. I would say for queries, have someone else read it, have other people take a look, because you're so close to your story, and things are going to seem obvious to you that will just not be to other people. So have other people look at it, query in batches. I always think that's super helpful, because then you can get a sense of how agents are responding. So like, let's say you send out 10 queries and nobody responds. It's like, oh, maybe it's like the query. Maybe I can tweak this. I can fix that. And then you send out another batch, and then they go, great, send me pages. Like send me the first 10 pages. But then you notice, wait, nobody's requesting after that. You can sort of get levels where you're like, oh, maybe I need to tweak this, tweak that. So again, it's not 100%, but at least you can sort of get a gauge depending on the kind of project you're working on. And then in terms of don'ts, a big one is definitely don't slam the genre in which you're writing. Like I definitely get some people where they'll go, oh, like all picture books are terrible and all of that. But this one's great. Like this one that I'm writing is better than all of them. Like, okay, that means you don't know the category or the genre in which you're writing. You're slamming all the things. You don't respect the genre, right? So make sure you're not doing that. Another thing is to actually understand the genre, which is like hand in hand with the other one, right? Someone who's slamming it really doesn't know very well. They maybe read one book, two books, and go, oh, this sucks. And then they assume everything else sucks. But know the area in which you're writing. It will speak volumes, because especially if you come up with comp titles, and again, that's a whole other headache to deal with. It just helps you with certain aspects of the writing. Another thing is it's a combination. Don't denigrate yourself. Don't go, like I've seen queries where they'll go, oh, I tried my best. This might not be really good. But here's my book, right? I don't want to see that, nor do I want to see I'm the best, Rick Riordan sucks, or whoever, like I'm better than all of them, and you're just going to get all of your money. So when are we going to sign, right? You don't want either, but just think of it. This is a letter where you're introducing yourself. You wrote a book first of all, you wrote a book. So congratulations. Like so many people want to write a book. You're already ahead of the curve. The fact that you finished. So that's amazing. So then now, why did you write it? You're excited about it. I want that to come across on the page. So don't be afraid to show some personality. And I think those basic things, I tend and people get nervous about it, but I try to remind people, I don't tend to notice the query unless it's really amazing, which is pretty rare, right? Like,
yeah, because you read like hundreds of.
I read so many, right? I don't even know how many I've read it by this time. Like, I read so many. Most of my clients have written perfectly good query letters. If you at least good, right? Not terrible as in you've never looked at one. Those are easy to rule out. But when you've written the ones where it's amazing, that's pretty rare. Most people are going to fall in between. So do your best. And after a point, if you're just holding on to it for dear life and not wanting to let it go, I think there's a point where you just need to let it out and see what people say.
Love it. Love it. One other that I've heard from other agents is they can tell when you are just like spamming agents. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like when you're sending it to everybody under the sun.
Yeah. And again, we understand that you're querying many, and you should. Like, I don't believe in exclusives, right? There's some agents, I think the only time I've ever asked for exclusives is if I've said, and it's pretty rare, that I'll give an R&R. And I'll say, but it'll be a short, like, oh, if you do the R&R, I don't know, maybe a 2-week exclusive or something like that. But never beyond that, you should be querying widely. But yeah, I know what you mean. Like if people actually will spam agents, like I've seen where I'm part of a list of 100 that they send in the same email, which is, again, I don't think that's any of you here at all because you're here. But there's some people who are kind of wild and will do things like that. So I also want to talk about too, since you brought it up, the personalization aspect, right? So I personally, and I think many agents I talk to, you don't have to worry too much about over personalizing. It's just By the spam, so the spam is different. So by spam, I can tell like you're sending me things I don't even represent. Like you just know I'm a literary agent and you're like, great, here she's going to take this thing. Even if I've said I don't do this thing and you just send it, I'm talking about those people. I
Right.
get a lot of those too.
Right.
Right. Or it's just like this generic dear whoever. Like it can always tell when it's a bit too cold. And at the same time, there are some, maybe you have some dream agents, and that's fine if you want to do the personalization. But the personalization is a bit tricky because sometimes a person will email me and think, oh, I mentioned your manuscript wish list. That's a personalization, but that's actually not. Right? It's something anyone can find.
No.
So if you're
doing your research.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I don't expect people to do it if I know I'm one of how many, because I know it's a lot of work. But when you do it, just do it as best you can. So you don't have to say, Linda, I know you're looking for middle grade. Yeah, I know that, but that's not a personalization. I would say personalization would be something more like maybe we met at a conference, or maybe you listened to some interview, like something that's kind of unique. Or maybe, again, if you've really loved one of my clients' books and you're like, oh my gosh, I have an ego. It's always nice. But again, I don't require it, just so you know, because querying is a lot of work. So just the idea of personalizing 50 queries, I would say maybe do it for your top choices if you have some dream ones. And after that, let it go. Just let it go, because you'll drive yourself nuts.
Yeah, definitely. And I like that you also gave the tidbit of like the Excel sheet.
Yes.
My spreadsheet was like my Bible, because
Yes.
there's so many like little nuances that that can get lost. Like there's no way you're going to be able to store all that information.
Oh, no way. Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely use the spreadsheet, and then Query Tracker was a great tool.
Oh yeah. I heard they have a lot of spreadsheets there too, right? I think.
Okay. So like there's the free that you can get, and then there's like the premium, and then if you have subscribed to the premium, they create the spreadsheet for you.
Awesome.
Which is nice. So
yeah.
Cool. So dropping a lot of gems here, y'all.
Yes.
One more. So in your experience, what qualities do you look for in a potential client? Kind of talked about it a little bit. Like the obvious is that they're submitting stuff that you're actually seeking.
Yes, definitely.
What else?
Yeah. I always like to see that they have a long-term vision, even if they're not sure where they're going, but that they have different ideas that they're excited about, that they kind of see this as a long-term goal, right? A long-term thing, because publishing really is a marathon, right? And it's something that you have to work so hard. Like when you get to one level, there's always that feeling where I've made it. And then you get to the next level, you're like, oh no. It's like, how do you, right? You're going to go, first, you're probably going to go, finish the book. I've made it. Okay, now I need an agent. I've made it. It just never ends, right? So it is, right? Like once you get published, then there's another goal you're trying to meet. It never ends. And even people I talk to all the time who are ultra successful, there's always something there. So it's nice to know that, and you know that it's a long game, and you have enthusiasm, and you have to really love what you're doing, because otherwise, good luck. There are easier ways to make money, for sure. And of course, as your agent, I'm going to push for the best deal for you. But if you're only focused on money, 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 trust me, you're not going to last. So I would say enthusiasm, love for what you're doing is going to be so critical, especially because there are going to be moments where you're like, why am I doing this?
All the time.
All the time. You're going to be like, wait, why am I doing this again? And they're like, oh, yeah. I've done that with agenting where I'm like, why am I doing this? I'm like, wait, is there anything else I want to do? No, fine. So you're going to be in that kind of role. You have to know it. And someone who is very open, very flexible, because you have to be adaptable, especially with traditional publishing, right? You have to be adaptable. You have to kind of flow like water, because so many things don't work out the way we want it to. And it's only hindsight that you go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like that. No, I think there was like some business coach who had told me something like, no means next opportunity or new opportunity. It's like, don't take it as a rejection forever. It just means something else is down the road for you. So I like someone who can keep that sense of spirit. And eventually, again, rejection is practice. In the beginning, it's hard. It gets a little easier. So it is practice. I like my clients to get very used to rejection, because that's the business. Like you're just going to, even when you're a best-selling author or whoever, you're going to get rejected. And the collaboration comes in where, you know, we are working together, right? Where it's, yes, you're hiring me, but it's not just one-sided, right? Or me running the show or you running the show. It is us together where we're talking about, okay, what do you want for yourself? What do you view for yourself? And I also like someone who, yes, shoots for the stars, because yeah, you want a movie deal, you want all that. Awesome. I love that for you. But also to be realistic too, right? To be like understanding where it's like, we're going to shoot for all the things and to keep dreaming, but at the same time to, again, understand there's nothing we can control at all except for the writing that you put out. That's the only thing. So I think just someone who also has a sense of humor, collaborative, flexible, and that's it. Because I'm never going to be the agent who says, I'm going to get you a 6-figure deal. Like, and hey, I would love that. I want all my deals to be 6, 7 figures. I've done those deals. But again, it's like an attorney, right? Like they can't guarantee you a win. We have strong feelings about it and we have educated guesses because obviously I don't love to work for free for who, you know, how many, which we do a lot as agents. So we definitely take a chance on each other, which is kind of beautiful, right? Especially when you're coming up together. I think that's something special. And I always tell people to not skimp on the newer agents. I think I've been at this for 10 years already and publishing for 20. And I always think, I'm like, the people who sign with me, especially my first couple years, I'm like, how? I mean, you're amazing, but thank you so much. Especially, again, you come up together. They're hungry. They're wonderful. And again, as long, I would say, like, if you're concerned, always look at the agency they're with, right? Is it legitimate agency? Great. Are they getting mentorship? Great. But everyone starts somewhere. So, you know, you have your dream agents who like represent like certain massive people, but I would say mix it up. Have some young people because they have the energy. They are super hungry. They will work for you. So, you know, don't
I
skip on
cannot
it.
agree with that more for
Yeah.
sure. So just to reiterate,
Yes.
flexibility, sense of humor, and a vision for doing this long term.
Yeah, definitely.
Love that. And yes, I'm going to say don't sleep on those newer agents. My agent was a newbie.
I watched. That's right. Yeah. See?
My agent was a newbie. And, you know, it's one of those things where you're like,
yeah, it's a risk no matter what. Like everyone's taking a chance on each other. So I hear you.
but my agent, Caitlin, was so hungry. She's a fellow Aries. So we like bonded over us being like crazy fire signs. And we both had the same nickname growing up. We were
Oh, I
both
love that.
the Energizer Bunny growing up. So it was like this moment of like, okay, even though you're new, I know you're gonna hustle. Like you're because we're like cut from the same cloth in that
Yes.
sense, right? And she hustles.
Oh yeah, she's amazing. She's done so well. I
She's
mean,
done so well. No, seriously.
yeah,
And it's there's something to it when she told me, she's like, so it's cool to like be each other's first for certain
yeah.
things. Like
It's
this
like a
sounds
bonding experience. It really is.
super bonding. Like she was like, you were my biggest deal so far, right?
Yay,
So like,
yeah, I love
like,
that.
oh snap, you know. And then like another time, she was just like, you were the first when like you're my first author where an editor pitched you.
Love it.
So like
Yes,
that was cool. So like one of
yes,
my upcoming books was an editor actually reached out to her and pitched,
perfect.
and she's like, "It happened
See?
to us," and I'm like, "It happened to us." So yeah, for sure. Like
Yeah.
you have to. This is people who enter this industry don't do it for the money. Like
No.
there are so many easier ways to make money, but
Yeah.
I love it. I recharge my batteries with school visits. For
Yeah.
me, when I'm getting those like endless rejections, which still happens, um, I do a school visit and then I get the hugs at the end from the
Oh,
kiddos. And I'm like,
yeah.
this is why I do it, right? So you have to have your why. Like, why is it that you're doing this? And hold on to that why. Put it on a vision board, whatever you need to do to constantly remind yourself of that. And the agent will know. Like they'll know that okay, you're in this for the right reasons. You're not just trying to make money because that's not really what this is about. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna take an audience question before I move on.
Oh.
The next one we have Nicole Young.
Yeah.
So it looks like you're currently close to queries. Will you open soon? Not to put you on blast, but
No. I'm glad. Okay, because one of my colleagues did ask me that, and she's like, "You have to do it," because like, all right, I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna try to open June, if not July. But I'm gonna say June because I did tell people at SCBWI New York that I would say June, and my
Okay.
cousin's like, I'm gonna hold you to that. So yeah, I've been closed for years,
I
so
know.
it's
You
time.
were on my list, and
It's time.
one day.
One day, yeah. I was like, you know what? I should open up. I've been getting hungry again too. Like,
Okay.
you always close when you're getting. I mean, it's a wealth. It's an abundance of wealth, and I always feel so blessed. And the quality of the submissions, and I always feel wonderful. I'm like, oh my gosh, you want to work with me? Thank you. So it is an abundance of riches. So that's my homework. I need to do that.
Guys, like it's not just about constantly being open for the next thing.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
you have to take care of your existing clients.
That's it. Yeah, that's why I'm horribly slow.
You have to close. Like if your clients are busy and you're selling and you're doing that, like you have to take care of them. So
yeah, exactly. Because
fingers crossed for June, y'all.
Yes, June, because at Galton Zacher, what they've been doing, which I think is interesting, we've been like playing around with it. They open for 1 week of the month. So it would be probably the first week of June. And you follow on Instagram, Galton Zacher, because they always announce we're gonna open up and who's opening. So no, since I've been saying June, I'm gonna do it.
Okay.
That's next month. Oh my gosh.
I know. Time. What is time?
What is time?
Yeah. All right. So this is an interesting question that I get a lot from other authors that I'd love to hear your perspective on. How important is it for an author to have, like for a author to have an author platform?
Okay.
And like, is it important? Is it not important? And if it is important, what are some ways that you think are effective ways to building one?
Right. Oh yeah. So it really varies by category, genre. I would say for fiction, it doesn't matter. Is it bonus? We consider bonus points, right? So if an editor does see that you have platform, they're like, oh, that's amazing. Like it's never not going to help. But in fiction, it's all about the book itself. It's the book. That's it.
Okay.
And the rest, bonus points. For nonfiction, at least not on the children's side, for nonfiction adult, it's critical, absolutely critical. That's the thing that's going to drive it. And it's not necessarily, they will look at social media. That's usually kind of a clearer indication, but it's not necessarily social media driven. There are different ways of building platforms. So platform means you're an expert in your field. You know the audience whom you're targeting, and you already have a conversation going with them in a sense.
Right.
So it could be something like you attend conferences throughout the year that you're speaking at, right? You're giving talks. So let's say you're an expert on nuclear fission, which is very random. It just popped in my head. So let's say nuclear fission, and you have this expertise and you're talking about it at different conferences, you're writing articles online. All of these things are just building these credentials. That way, when people, if I Googled you, would you pop up, right? In some capacity. And even if you're not at all on social media, that's okay. But you have to have a platform somewhere because it just isn't enough, right? Are you like the top fellow in your class? Like there's just so many aspects to it. So yeah, if you're an expert in your field in some way, or even if it's a memoir, right? Let's say you're writing a memoir, you're an expert obviously on your life. Okay, are there ways that you can publish online for free? Are you writing op-eds? Are you writing, short things that people will get eyes on, right? Because then, wow, this post went viral. That's not a bad move. I'm not saying that's the only way you're going to get a book deal, but by getting your work out there, the more eyes get on it, and that's how you build platforms, especially for something that's like maybe a memoir, something super specific, super niche. We just want to know that you're kind of like the go-to person for it. That's it. That's really critical. So it takes a long time to do it. So if that's you, start now. Like that's the best thing you can do. And I think a lot of it is imposter syndrome where you're like, who am I to talk about this thing? But again, even if you're posting a blog that's getting a lot of readership, or a podcast, something where people will go that I'm like, oh, Katrina is the expert of this, or like, I think there's so many ways you can build it outside of social media. If you know that's not for you, feel free to try it. Social media can be very powerful, but I'm just saying If you know you hate it, then don't waste your time.
We'll
Just
do it.
at least try it. I would tell my clients, try it. But if you hate it, that's totally different.
Yeah.
Because we can always tell when you're just like phoning it in. It's not the same. It's not feeling authentic. And really think about it, you're building community. That's what you're doing when you're building platform. You're building community.
I love that. Building community. Absolutely. And I gotta say, the authors that I've seen that are successful are the ones that are building community authentically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're pouring back into the community through mentorship programs. Like maybe they were a mentor, or like you mentioned the podcast. I love doing podcasts. I've done so many podcasts because at my core, my mom's a teacher.
Oh, see?
I come from a family of educators. I was a teacher. So I love like sharing insights and I love like explaining things. And podcasts are perfect because then I get to like really like deep dive and like nerd out. I love nerding out. It's why I love my job at the work, because I get to have conversations like this, right? But it's doing it in a way that it doesn't feel like a chore, you know? While I'm doing it, I'm having fun. I'm learning. We're talking. We're sharing, and people can see that and can sense that. And social media is not the only way to do it.
Exactly. Cool. Yeah, I think that's what people understandably they go, oh my God, I don't have Twitter, Threads, whatever. They, I don't have that. And no, don't worry too much about that. Like explore things if you're new to it, but pick the thing that you actually like and want to stick with.
Definitely. All right, I'm gonna pick another audience question. Rachel, when you're reading a manuscript, what are the qualities of an author's writing that pull you in?
Ooh, that's a good question.
It is.
That would be, man, I guess because it's just something indefinable. I would say the voice. I mean, I think a lot of people would say that it's because obviously, look, you can tweak plot, you can tweak a premise, you can tweak the hook. But there has to be something special. Again, this is subjective, but something about the writing that kind of sings to me in a way that it just doesn't sing to everybody else, right? And it's not even and the question too is that people get hung up on, and again, it's understandable, the publishability aspect. Yes, I consider that for sure, but that's not the main driver either, right? Because we can work on stuff. There's some things I take on that are ridiculously raw, but I'm like, there's something here. Like there's just something, I don't know what, like even one of my earlier clients I took on, she required me for this adult literary fiction. And I wasn't doing much of that. I don't really do that, but I read, I was young and hungry, like brand new and hungry. I'm like, oh, let me skim. And just writing just pulled me in. I'm like, oh, darn, I guess I'm doing this. Right. So yeah, there has to be something indefinable, something very special about the voice, the way the writing just comes together really beautifully. And it doesn't work for everybody in the same way. I've let go so many projects that are perfectly publishable. So understand that if an agent turns you down, it isn't necessarily because this book will never be published and it's bad writing. No, most of the things I turn down are actually really good. And I'm like, they actually, I feel can be published. It's just not something that I've necessarily fallen head over heels in love with. And it's not even something that I have to enjoy once. I have to enjoy it enough that I'm reading it, because I will be reading it 50 plus times and still reading it with a smile. That's the key. Because yeah, there's some books that I read, I'm like, oh, this is actually really good. I don't know if I want to read it 10 times though. I enjoyed it for the one shot. So if I can read it, if I feel like, oh, I can read this over and over and anything they write for till the end of time, that's how I know. Which again is not a solid answer, but
no, there's something to it. Like I've had people ask me like define voice, and I'm like, I am not the person for that. There are a lot of other more knowledgeable videos.
It's like the rhythm and the word choice and the punctuation and the grit. It's all of that together. But it's like, what combination is the combination? I don't know. That's the thing I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it's all of those things combined that turn into a feeling.
Yeah, that's a
like my friends have told me like your books always make me cry.
Oh, yeah. They're beautiful. Like, yeah.
That's my voice.
Yeah.
Like I'm and it makes sense because I'm always crying over everything.
Yeah. You're emotional, you're connected. Yeah.
Yes. So it's like the words that I choose, like the balance between narrative and dialogue and all of those things combined.
Yeah.
That's the outcome. And there are going to be agents that gravitate toward it. And there's going to be agents that are like, I just want you to make me laugh. Or I want you to make me laugh. And it's hard, but just know that even if it gets rejected, it's there you will find the right home.
Yeah. I've had things where, again, it like we said, right, it's subjective. I had one project that sold, but one editor said, I love the premise, but not the voice. And then the other editor said, I love the voice, but not the premise. Like, you just don't know what you're going to get. You just, and things that I know my colleagues have sold that have become massive successes.
Yeah.
And they like got horrible rejection letters. Like my colleague represents Ben Clanton, who's like the Narwhal and Jelly series. And it's everywhere. Now everybody wants one of those books, but she was just saying nobody wanted it. Like one publisher in Canada took a chance on it, but nobody wanted it. So you just never know. You never know. Like, I love the big splashy deal for my client, right? It comes with certain implications. But I tell you, sometimes, more often than not, like those successes will come from those middle of the road, small deals that just explode sometimes. You just never know.
Yeah, definitely. All right. I just want to make sure like we're good on time. We have about 12 more minutes. Make sure if you have any questions that you pop them in the chat. We are prioritizing your questions. So thank you, Nicole and Rachel, for throwing those in there. You're awesome. All right, cool.
They're good questions. I'm loving them. Good questions.
They are. They're good questions. Okay, so here's another one. We talked about this a little bit, but let's focus on it. What advice do you have for writers who may be feeling discouraged by the rejection letters or setbacks in the publishing journey?
Yeah, that is so tough. And everyone has their journey. Some people have been doing it. I have a client too that I took her on. She had been represented by another agent, and she was just telling me, because we had another, like she sent me the latest manuscript. I'm like, it's getting there, but I know she's getting tired. I'm like, it's like, how do you sustain, right? How do you, I always tell my clients, it depends on where they are. Sometimes you have to take a break. So, sometimes, not always, because sometimes you take a break and then you just don't continue, right? I think it depends on where you are, how your stress level. I always say the best thing you can do is, of course, refill your creative cup. I always think, all right, are you making your whole life publishing? Which I have a habit of doing, and it's not good for me either. Because then even as an agent, then I start to feel like my sales are reflective of who I am. And that's not realistic. And I think writers, illustrators get into that same mentality, right? And especially it's so public, and you start to see people like, oh my gosh, I've been on submission this long, and this other person 2 seconds, and they got the 6-figure deal, and now it's a movie and all this stuff. So I would say the best thing is, yes, celebrate your community, but try to keep your head down and really, truly, like I would say, put blinders on. Like, please don't celebrate people, but then promptly forget about it, because you're going to compare yourself. There's no way around it. And once you start to do that, you just fall into a hole. And then if you start falling into that hole, and then let's say you get that deal, great. But then that comparison will just be the shadow where you're like, instead of celebrating, you're like, oh, but this person got this. Why didn't I get that? Right. So stay in your little hole, like just try to focus on the why again. Why are you doing this? Right. Yeah. And it doesn't mean you're not allowed to be depressed about it. You're going to have those down moments where you're just like, are you kidding me? And especially when you get closer and closer, I hate that. Like, I love and hate it, because it means I'm getting there, but it's not quite yet. I've had clients where it's like, it's hit acquisitions, but maybe not quite yet. It's just like such a bummer. But I would say, try to remember why you're doing it. Try to have some fun. And if you feel that your whole life is publishing, maybe just take a breather and do something that's creative, but not publishing centered. Yeah. And also, when you can come back to it, work on different projects. Like, continue to work on projects that excite you. Because I write as well, for myself mostly, but I also came from the marketing side, all these things, and I'm an agent, of course. So I start to write something. I'm like, oh, that's not marketable. And I'm like, wait, get that out of your head, because that's not going to help you. Like, it's helpful in circumstances later, but then if that's leading the way, I always tell people, please don't write to market. Like, even when I talk to clients, I'll always tell them what the market is. Like they'll ask me, they'll say, hey, I have these 5 ideas. What do you think is the most marketable? I'll say, okay, these are technically the most marketable until it changes in 2 seconds, right? Like it changes every minute. I'm like,
Right, right,
technically, this is the easier, whatever that means, sale. But what are you the most excited about?
right.
That's the thing. So
Mhm.
as long as you can keep that excitement going, um, that's the best you can do. And just remind yourself, this is a kind of place where a lot of people drop out. A lot of like so many people, like even agents, they drop out after a certain point that they don't last long enough. Editors, they drop. So if you can just stick it out long enough,
Yeah.
you'll make it. It's just a question of when. Like truly, I think someone who's been in the business for a long time, I've seen it time and time again. Like people, and again, subjective. I've seen people who are not super talented. That's okay, but they worked hard enough and they're still here. And look
Yeah.
at that. And they're doing well and they're getting better and they're doing things. So if you give up, that's it. Like then you're one of so many people who've given up. But if you can just stick it out, I always think it's like, do you really want to walk away from the slot machine just before your number comes up? I always feel it's like that. Like it could have been the next
Good.
pull. It
Yeah.
could have been the next pull. So
Yeah.
just keep going. But as long as you're still excited about it, that's the thing. Like try not to lose the reason you're doing this. And it
Mhm.
sounds so simple, but again, I have clients who do well, and sometimes they'll set a numbers expectation for themselves, like when the royalty statement comes in, and they're doing really well. And I'm like, hey, don't get down on yourself. But then they'll get like a letter from a fan, and they'll go, oh, that's yeah, I forgot. This is it. And then they're like, all of the rest of it kind of falls away. All of
Absolutely.
it
Yeah,
does.
I have like a special bin that I designated where I
Yeah.
keep my fan mail now
Oh,
because
especially for
that
kids and
that's what's keeping me
oh
going these days.
yeah.
Like it's hard, it's competitive, it's
Yes.
not an easy industry, and
No.
like
Not at all.
the
Not at all.
rejections don't get they kind I don't know. I don't think they get easier. I think you just get more used to it.
I think it's this. You just build a stronger like I know for me over the years since I get rejections constantly because I have so many no, 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 no.
Yeah.
It does get it's like you build that callus,
Yeah.
like a little bit. Like I still don't love them. And honestly, half the time when I'm gonna get a letter from an editor back when it's a submission, I start to skim it to go, okay, no, thank you, blah, blah. So when it's an offer, I'm like, whoa, like I'm just so used to rejections.
Yeah.
I think for you, depending on where you are in your career, just go, I aim to get at least this many rejections because it means you're putting yourself out there.
Right.
Truly.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. One more question before time. Um, this is one that you probably get all the time, but I think it's important that we ask. How do you typically approach the negotiation process with publishers on behalf of your client? Like a lot of people, when they think of an agent,
Yeah.
you said it at the very beginning, contracts negotiation. That is a huge part of what you do.
Yeah.
So how do you like approach that process?
Yeah. Yeah. It's different with every publisher, but I mean, the always thing is to always ask for more, right? That's always the fun part, right? You never say thanks, okay, we'll take it, right? Never. I mean, even with clients when they're negotiating things for themselves in life, I'm like, never take a first offer. That's not a thing. But it really depends on in terms of the way we approach it. It depends on the publisher, depends on the person we're talking to, because I think a lot of writers, and I get it because you see them on TV. If you see like a literary agent, like they're just like super hard ass about things. And it's not that we're not, we definitely can be. But, I'm not an attorney where I just like go like a bull in a china shop, right? There are ways of,
Yeah.
like there are ways of handling things. And I think it's because we know these people so well. We know how to use, like for instance, like sometimes in a negotiation, I'm asking for a thing. Like I'll just say like, we don't want an option or just something simple. Like we don't want this. And then they'll be like, nope, nope, nope. Like, but then if you repeat the question, maybe in a different way and done in just the right, like you get to know their lingo. It's like, oh, if you just, it's literally the same thing I'm asking for, but I'm going to say it this way. They're like, oh yeah, we could do that. Like, it's just so funny. Like you kind of get to know the terminology. You get to know the people involved, especially the different, because we always start out by negotiating with the editors, right? We
Yes.
negotiate, like whenever I get an offer, we always go, yay, thank you, cool. Let me let the other editors know. And then they have to wait a couple weeks. And then once we know if they're the last person standing, we negotiate something called the deal points, right? Like that's the main chunky points of a contract, right? Because contrary to what you might think, we don't say, great, send the contract. No, we have to actually negotiate. I know it sounds silly, negotiate most of the big stuff before the contracts come in. Because if we wait too late, it's kind of assumed it's a yes. So we negotiate all the big stuff, not just, of course, the numbers, options and competes and all these annoying little things that don't seem important, but are very important, especially now with AI. We're trying to get that as much as possible in there. NFTs, all of these little things that we're trying to have conversations about. So again, there are times where I have to be like that hard ass person, but it just depends on the person, right? Like I think there are ways of getting what you need, but just like how do you do it, right? There are always so many ways of doing it, and at the end of it, always feeling like everybody won, right? Because sometimes you have to concede some things. You're like, okay, fine, it's part of it, and obviously it depends on how much leverage you have. Because hey, if it's an auction situation, that's easy. Multiple people are bidding. There's certain things they're gonna be like, okay, fine. But if it's one person, which happens more often than not, there's certain leverage that leads into that as well. But I think most publishers generally are willing to work with you. And I've had really good experiences. I think the only times I've had not great experiences are just, and not all of them, because I've worked with some really small publishers who've been so amazing and wonderful. But then there's some small publishers who don't like agents too much. So like you just have to be wary of certain deals you're doing. But I'm not anti-small publisher because again, I have some small publishers that we work with who are fantastic and beautiful and wonderful. But always like being aware, like for instance, smaller publishers, and I'm talking about teeny presses, are less likely to negotiate certain things because they don't have a lawyer on staff, right, on retainer. So they have to pay to get it sent. But again, there's so many things, but there are many ways of handling negotiations. We always fight for our clients and try to get them the best possible deal, that they can get. And I'm always talking to my client every step of the way too, because money is one thing, but you have all of these pieces that are so important.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, if we're conceding this, but we're getting this, which is actually super important. You're not really just giving things away. So I think it's really helpful to explain to the clients what's the context, and also getting a sense of, sometimes if we're kind of at a standstill for like money, maybe I try to get a sense of what is the client looking for, and then what's the reality of that, and does it make sense? So there are a lot of conversations that are happening, and it can go in so many ways. I always feel like even when I think I know going in, something new comes in. I'm like, okay, great. So something new, especially auctions. I always find that auctions, I'm like, okay, I've been through this before. It's going to come out this way. And then whoops, something come like, oh, I just learned a new thing. So very interesting. It keeps us all on our toes. Yeah.
That's really good to know. Yeah. I feel like the negotiation process, so much of it went over my head, and I'm so glad that I had Nate advocating for me, because there was no way I would have been able to advocate
and it's
for myself.
Easier for me. Yeah, that's a good point. It's harder for, I think if it were talking for myself, it'd be way harder. I have no problem doing it for my clients. Asking for the moon, for me, it'd be very uncomfortable. I'm better at it now, but it's not the same.
It's not. Well, and also just like the knowledge, right? So even if you have all the knowledge and you understand all the lingo and you've done it for years, it is harder to do it for yourself than it is for someone else to do it for you, for sure.
That's true.
It's why even like agents have a literary agent. There are
I would totally get one if I were like being published.
And they have someone else doing it, because it gets messy.
Right, because you can just keep to the fun, creative aspects of things, you as the creative. And then me, I get my hands dirty for you. And it's not that you don't know. Even if it's you saying, I want this thing, you'd be like, I'm sorry, my agent. So it just keeps it a little purer for the relationship.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. You are amazing.
So are you.
You were closed when I was querying you. I'm glad that we still got to have this chat, because the hype, you lived up to all the hype in my brain.
Thank you.
I love you. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I'm going to like say my spiel. Thank you for all of the our audience for tuning in. We appreciate you, all the writers, booksellers, and book lovers in the room. Make sure you check out our resources. I'm going to put our newsletter on there. Make sure you sign up, because not only do we share workshops like this, but we're also having our margins conference very soon. So save the date for our virtual margins conference taking place September 9th to the 14th. And then our in-person conference in Denver is taking place the 20th to the 22nd. So, and just one thing about the margins conference, it's probably one of my favorite conferences that I've ever been to, because it's a conference by us for us. Mm-hmm. So the way the conversations happen and the way that you're building that community is it's beautiful, and it's very welcoming and authentic, and yeah, it's great. We build our programs collectively with our community. So if you have things that you want to ask, if you have specific requests for workshops, I'm going to put the link to the form that you all can fill out. This panel came about because of requests. We have another panel coming up about contracts specifically, and then another panel where we talk about publishing lingo. Those topics come from these forms and emails that people send us. So we want to make sure that we're actually delivering programming that you want and that will benefit you. We also cannot run these programs without our community support. We are committed to ensuring that these events remain free and accessible. So if you are able, please continue to support us and consider donating to the Word at thewordfordiversity.org/donate. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being in community with us. We hope to see you again very soon. Adios.